Thank you, Enrico. And good morning, everybody. So I am Daniele Ottaviani. I'm the coordinator of the quantum computing group here at Cineca. And also I'm the chairman of this first session, that is a session dedicated to the industries. So let's move directly to our first speaker, that is Raffaele Mauro from Endeavor Italia. Raffaele Mauro is passionate about technology, policy, and global finance. He's the managing director of Endeavor Italia, an organization that provides access to small capital, talent, and market scale-up companies. Previously, he was head of finance for innovation and entrepreneurship at Intesa Sanpaolo, and now at a venture capital background at United Ventures and the P101. Raffaele is a Kaufman Fellow, also an MPA from Harvard Kennedy School, and a PhD from Bocconi, and attended a Singularity University GSP at the NASA Ames Research Center. He authored the book Hacking Finance and Quantum Computing. So, Raffaele, the floor is yours, and thank you for participating.
Thank you, Daniele. Thank you, Enrico, and I'm glad to be here with all of you. I will start to share my presentation, and thanks again for this amazing experience. So let's start with the presentation.
Perfect.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, yes, it's perfect.
Fantastic.
You have only to
okay.
The presentation. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Today I will provide you a combination of topics. So there will be a short introduction to venture capital and how technology companies and startups are being funded. That was one of the topics that were interesting for this conference. The second topic will be the interaction between quantum computing startups and in general quantum technology startups and the finance environment. And finally, I will provide you an overview about what is happening in Italy, and especially what are the institutions providing venture capital fundings to hard tech and technology companies. So couple of introductory remarks. This presentation is tailor-made for people without a business background, so we start from the basics. I will focus on finance and markets, not on technology and applications, because that will be the focus of the next presentations. And my main approach will be to avoid the hype and enabling you smart decisions if you want to interact with the market after the research and technology transfer phase of your projects. So just a couple of things about my background. My current title is Managing Director at Endeavor. So I'm helping scale up companies in order to grow and expand, like companies like Bending Spoons or Satispay. But my next job will be Primo Space. So I've just launched a venture capital fund focused on space technology companies. And if you want to learn more about that, I would be glad to speak with you in the future. So let's start with venture capital. The essence of venture capital is to enable the creation of tools and products that will be impossible to finance without this specific form of finance. So the hyper growth and actually sometimes even the birth of companies like Google or Amazon or even SpaceX partially was impossible without a specific form of finance called risk capital or venture capital. Traditional banking loans or other forms of capital were not able to have them. In essence, venture capital is the build of the link between talented founders, like the people that you see here, and I put also an Italian physicist, Matteo Fago, a successful founder of Venere a few years ago, and smart capital. So funds like Sequoia Capital, Kleiner Perkins, or Founders Fund, or Asner Horowitz are designed specifically to tailor-made very high risk, very early stage companies typically with some kind of radical innovation or something that was not tried before in the market. And that leads to my first concept. Startups are not a legal concept or traditional, I would say, accounting concept, they are experiments. This is relevant for our audience of scientists. In the top entrepreneurs, they reason with a methodology which is similar to the scientific method. In a toy model of the scientific method is that you have a concept about the nature, a theory, you design an experiment, nature answers your question, and you basically evolve over time. You falsify or verify your theories, and then you evolve a spiral of knowledge that increases over time. Well, the best entrepreneurs, they do exactly this. They have a conception about what is the market, what is the kind of product or service that will intersect with the market, and then they try to generate tests and to do as much as low-cost testing as possible in order to verify their hypothesis, and then building a cycle of evolving knowledge. So first idea, startups are experiments. They do something that was never tried before or tried in a specific way. Second concept is startups are risks. So when you launch a new company, the risk of failure is extremely high. Actually, the most of the new companies, they fail in a few years, and a small percentage of them is basically return the capital, and a very small percentage actually, and that's the interesting part, generates a multiplier return on investment, which could be extremely high. This is the reason why typically venture capital is focused on high technology companies like software, medical technology, biotechnology, and the other industries. The third idea regarding startups is growth. So when you fund a startup, when you are funding a startup, this is not funding a consulting service or a restaurant or a pizzeria. A small company, a consulting company could be perfectly successful, but does not grow. So the concept behind startups is that they need to grow over time. The paradigmatic examples are companies like Facebook or Amazon that basically over 15 years, 20 years, they continue to grow extremely over time. But even the hardware or harder companies, they have this kind of mindset, and they go beyond the SME or small company stage. There are several institutions actually funding in several ways startups. We will focus today on venture capital funds, but you can find actually an entire ecosystem of institutions like incubators, business angels, public institutions, family offices in Italy, a lot, that are actually trying to fund innovation and innovative or high technology companies. What is the job of venture capital fund? Basically, they buy share, so a portion of ownership of a company, and then they try to increase the value of the company, so increase the value of the pie, and then they try to sell their share of ownership at an increased value. So that's in a nutshell, what a risk capital investor does with his job. And what is not venture capital, of course, is not a grant. So the idea is to return capital with a capital gain after a few years. Is not a loan. There is no protection. So the person that invests basically can lose everything, but there is also a lot of upside potentially, not just 5% or 7% of interest. And it's not private equity, which is another form of finance. After the venture capital finance cycle, generally there is the exit. So basically, the idea is that after 5, 7, 10 years, there will be some kind of liquidity event in jargon. So the company will be sold to another company, like Google acquiring DeepMind, for instance. There will be an IPO, like a few days ago for Airbnb. Or other kind of liquidation events. Of course, the most frequent event, unfortunately, is a write-off. So the company is worth zero or fails because actually we are speaking about a risky environment. Um, the iron law of venture capital is the extreme discrepancy between returns. So if you invest in public stock market, in stock market, typically you can go up 20%, go down 20%. When you invest in private companies, early stage, the variance is much higher. So you can have a 10x return, 100x return. Is something that is deeply counterintuitive, and the people that are doing this job and the top entrepreneurs, they try to reason in this way. Why companies approach technology investors? Typically not just because of the money, because often the money, you can have the same resources with different approaches. They approach venture capitalists also because of the know-how, the helping for hiring, the contacts in the industry, help for the next financing rounds, and to gain strategic insights. So in jargon, we call this the smart money. So you try to avoid the slow and dumb investors, and you try to pick the top ones that will add value across the years, also behind the initial investment. Of course, this is not an industry without criticisms. There are many problems. The most common one is that, of course, that some people, like in all industries, basically take advantage of the entrepreneurs, and so that could be, there is the possibility of unfair deal terms against the entrepreneurs. That is very common in non-mature markets. That could be the presence of an unnatural pressure for growing companies. So because the investor need to have a capital gain in 2 years, it may be that this is not the natural rate of development for the specific company. There are financial bubbles, and we will talk more about that, because we had small mini bubbles about in blockchain, AI, and maybe the quantum hype could be potentially defined or not as a bubble. We will discuss this. And then, of course, in some countries, like in Italy, there is a lower propensity to risk in comparison with other ecosystems. So I will provide you few information about that later. In Italy, actually, we have very interesting cases of company with hyper growth. We have interesting growth rates, like Roboz, which is a 3D printing, so hardware manufacturing, 3D printing, high performance 3D printing, based in Puglia, a very successful company, or Civitanavi System in Marche region for the aerospace industry, or WISE for medical technology, and many others. Behind the deep tech sector, we had very interesting high growth companies like Mending Spoons, actually one of the top mobile apps builders in the world. Satispay, which attracted one of the largest VC deals in Italy in the last few years, with a $100 million investment a few days ago, and many others. So we have a small ecosystem here, but it's growing, and there are interesting cases that we can potentially discuss. So let's go in the quantum realm, and what is happening at the interplay between venture finance and quantum computing. Well, first of all, let's have a look at the quantum technologies and their market potential. As you know, there is an entire ecosystem of quantum technologies, from cryptography to sensors, atomic clocks. Some of them are more disruptive, some of them are more market ready, and there are funds that are actually investing in the whole spectrum of quantum technologies and quantum startups. And of course, there is a lot of interest in the I would say the most ambitious projects regarding quantum computing, that is potentially a game changer in some industries. But if you are working in sensors, cryptography, data processing, there are actually very concrete and even short-run opportunities. Why quantum computing is fascinating for from some of the players in the industry, of course, because of the scientific relevance, because for some specific domains could potentially represents an extension of the Moore's law, and also because of the spike and the commercial activity. There is also a mimetic component in the behavior of investors, because they see that someone else did an investment in one company, and they try to look what is happening in this space and try to learn more. Of course, there was a lot of media hype, or I would say a lot of PR regarding quantum computers, but as everyone in this room or in this virtual room knows, there are incredible engineering problems yet to be solved. So it's a fascinating space, but there is a lot of work to be done. So let's start with the large companies. A significant slice of investments in the quantum space does not come only from governments, but from larger technology players. We see Google, Intel, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon heavily investing in this space, both on the quantum, on the software side and the hardware side. And then we see other companies in completely different industries like aerospace, e-commerce, or investment banking, trying to do POCs, proofs of concepts, and exploring the quantum computing space, and try to perform a small chunk of investments. Of course, there are the large, big technology companies. They have a significant presence in this industry. Everyone knows the quantum supremacy announcement from Google from last year. The multi-year investments, which is hard to quantify, but is for sure in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars and even more, and the focus on both software and hardware. Microsoft is developing very interesting tools, the Quantum Development Kit. They are planning the Azure Quantum, so the cloud compute, the quantum systems embedded in cloud computing systems, and they are also, of course, exploring the topological approach, which is I would say fascinating but niche approach in the quantum hardware world. And IBM is one, of course, with the strongest track record of research over time, with the IBM Quantum Experience, the Hummingbird processors, and also a timeline for developing processors with even much more qubits. Of course, I would like to quote Amazon. Amazon, as many companies mentioned before, is trying to embed quantum systems within cloud computing. Why this? Because, of course, it's very unlikely that we will have the quantum computer in our home or our small company. We will access this kind of processing power like electricity in the cloud, and Amazon, of course, as the leader in the world in the cloud services, is investing there. And it's interesting because also an Italian, Simone Severini, was named as director of quantum and pushing projects relating to the space. Beyond large companies, there are startups. First of all, I would like to mention you the full stack companies like D-Wave or Rigetti, that received more than $100 million in funding. D-Wave, for instance, received $216 million over time of venture capital funding, almost 200 employees, sold devices to NASA, Google, Lockheed, Los Alamos, developed a strong IP portfolio, and have a very strong investor base like Goldman Sachs, Bezos, Fidelity, and others. They work with the adiabatic approach, which is somewhat controversial, but with interesting results. So we will learn from them more later. Then there is, of course, Rigetti. with $200 million raised, almost 150 employees, top-notch investors like Andreessen Horowitz or Founders Fund. So some of the best Silicon Valley investors working there. The Aspen 8 processor and exploring applications in materials, chemistry, optimization, finance, and many others. So after the large startup cases, we have a smaller companies or more niche companies, so not doing the full stack. For instance, there are companies focused on hardware like IonQ, Quantum Circuits, or PsiQuantum. All of them are actually now approaching the levels of funding of the full stack companies, and they are exploring typically different kind of hardware paradigms. There is not yet a standard in the quantum computing world. So like PsiQ with the photonic approach, IonQ with the ion trap hardware, and also other companies exploring trying to build I will say all the components and the whole ecosystem regarding the quantum hardware. And other example is from quantum software startups, so companies trying to build machine learning applications and operating systems, and or doing integration for large companies like Sanadu, Zapata, Cambridge Quantum Computing, and others. And also in this space, I see that across even in comparison with 2 years ago, the levels of funding are increasing significantly over time. So if you look at the whole ecosystem, you can see that every single vertical is starting to be filled with a new wave of companies, and with exploring the different paradigms and the different software verticals. And even if you deep dive in Europe, we can find something similar. So companies working both on applications, on components, and on computing in general. Of course, in Europe, it's much harder to build from scratch the full stack models, so the D-Waves or the Rigettis of the future. But for sure, there is a space for doing something very interesting, and I'm optimistic about what we can do. Couple of words about the investors. Some of the top-notch Silicon Valley investors invested in quantum computing technologies. Andreessen Horowitz, Founders Fund, are the best on in my point of view. Funds like In-Q-Tel that are related to security services or the intelligence community invested in these companies. The billionaires like Bezos and Branson invested in those companies, and also Google Ventures, like corporate ventures, and investment banks like Goldman Sachs. So basically, all of the top level investors tried at least one investment in the quantum computing side, and that's actually an interesting news for us. In Europe, we have also a specialized player called Quantonation. They are based in France, and here you can find some of their most recent deals like Pascal, Multiverse, or CA, and others. There are not so many funds doing only quantum. This is an interesting example, but there are more funds doing deep tech or frontier technologies or hard science technologies in Europe. But that's interesting that we saw the birth of a specialized fund. I will skip the aggregate value investment. Let's say a couple of words about the bubble. Sorry, I wanted to have a Baby Yoda slide in my presentation. So the question: are we in a quantum investment bubble? I would say there are two potential considerations. Yes and no. So yes, because of course there is an overheating and a hype in the industry. There was the growth, a perceived growth of investment deals and volume during the last 5 to 10 years. And also the birth of quantum startups actually increased a lot during the last 5 years. On the other hand, quantum technologies represents now a very small fraction of venture capital investment. The growth is comparatively in line with the overall increase of the VC of venture capital investments during the last decade. And so I can say that potentially is a media bubble rather than an investment bubble. There were few very large deals like PsyQ or Rigetti, but as a overall, the small set of quantum venture capital is growing, but is not in comparison like the blockchain. So there is not a complete overhype even from the financial point of view. From the media point of view, is different. There was a lot of excitation, but from the investment point of view, is growing, but is not on the publish side of things. Couple of final words about what is happening in Italy. Context in Italy, of course, we are in a country with hard competitiveness factors like civil law and taxation, slow growth, and a lower propensity to risk in comparison with other ecosystems. On the other hand, the ecosystem is growing, the number of players is growing, the volume of investment is growing. There is a relatively low cost of productive factors, so it costs less to structure a team in order to build the product, and there are several new public funding initiatives for hard technologies. First of all, there are few deep technology funds like Eureka Ventures or Vertis Ventures or Primo Space or Pariter Partners, and even more that were announced a few days ago, like Cicerio from Bombassei and many others. So these are only examples, but we start to see specialized players focused on hardware technology and the frontier science companies. Secondly, there are new public sector players like Enea Tech or Fondo Nazionale dell'Innovazione. They will be focused on science-based projects and new technology companies, and we start to invest, especially Enea Tech, we start to invest next year. So there are high expectations, and we will see what will happen. There are multi-strategy funds investing in different industries, like 360 Capital Partners, Innogest, Indaco. And then there are vertically focused funds like United Ventures or PM101 investing only in digital technology or computer science related projects. I have at the end of my allotted time, can I extend for 1 minute? Okay, I will go for another minute and.
Okay, and yes, if you can conclude, because we have no time for questions, but I don't think there is a lot of question right now. But if you want to speak for another minutes, it's okay.
I will say just a final minute about if you are presenting your project and trying to translate a research project or in a company, the key elements to consider for interacting with an investor are the team. So the investor need to see a team which is credible, motivated, and wants to spend time with the project. So they don't want to see pet projects, but something that is a life challenge for the person. They want to see markets, so how these technologies intersecting with potential use cases and potential high growth market. They want to see the innovation and how this kind of technology is not something that is fascinating by itself, but is defensible, could improve over time, and could scale with several users. And they want to see, of course, traction. So going from prototype to a product, and then with the acquisition of customers, and finally potentially revenues and profits. So that's the basics, and I would like to thank you. And if you want to explore or go deep dive on these topics, feel free to write to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Raffaele. Thank you. It was a very, very interesting talk. Thanks for doing that. There is a question. There's a question from Enrico.
Yes. So first, thank you for this fantastic talk, keynote speech, very beautiful. Raffaele, I have a very quick question because we are in late. What about the relationship with the national policies and this kind of investment? Is something needing a national policy or something which is independent, this kind of process?
Okay, in my opinion, the empirical evidence shows that for everything related with the basic research and long-term thinking, some kind of public policy is needed. So the private test sector by itself is enough. Is thinking too much in the short term, and in order to fund research or research-based projects, some kind of public support is needed. Of course, when we speak about transferring science into the markets, we need to be careful because sometimes public funding could distort incentives and building things that push people to build things that are not useful. But so it's a very complex topic. I think that there are a few interesting examples, historical examples, if you want to deep dive. For instance, in Israel, the Yotzma Fund program, it was an incredible good example of a smart public policy that basically enabled science, enabled technology transfer, but without distorting the market incentives. And if you want, I can provide a few references to that.
Okay,